New details in the case of a New York woman who's accused of killing her fiancé while on a kayak outing in the Hudson River. In a preliminary hearing that took place yesterday, the court learned that Angelica Groswald admitted to tampering with a drain plug in her fiancé's kayak, as well as fiddling with his paddle. Her attorneys claim that Griswold, a native of Latvia, did not understand her Miranda rights during an 11-hour police interrogation. They even say she asked investigators, "Who's Miranda?" at one point, as in Miranda warnings. Bob Bianchi is a criminal defense attorney and a former head county prosecutor. Anahita Sadagatfar is a criminal defense attorney. Welcome to you both. Anahita, let me start with you. That claim that she didn't understand what Miranda warnings were, can you claim that after the fact, and does that work?
It's going to be a tough one. Yes, you can claim that. And remember, the prosecution's case essentially rests on this confession. Without her statements, they don't have a case because there's no forensic evidence, there's no eyewitnesses, there's no corroboration. And so, yes, the job of the defense here is to try to get those tapes inadmissible. And they're going to argue that, look, the defendant didn't understand her Miranda rights. English isn't her first language. That's evidenced by the fact that midway through the interrogation, she asked, "Who's Miranda?" as if that's a person. And they're also arguing that the tape shouldn't be admissible in this case, the confession, because the confession was forced. It was coerced. She was under duress. She sat in that interrogation room for 11 hours, and apparently she complained to the interrogator. She said she wasn't feeling well. She said that she was bleeding. She possibly suffered from a miscarriage, and the investigator didn't do anything. They just continued to question her. So
okay, they questioned
really,
her for
if the
11
judge
hours
buys
in total.
either of these arguments,
let's bring Bob in here.
If the judge
Bob,
buys either, it gets
claiming
tossed.
that after the fact that she didn't know what she was talking about. They spoke with her first for 3 hours, then they read her Miranda rights, and then they spoke with her for an additional period of time. Can they claim that, and will it work?
Yeah, I mean, the first issue is why they didn't read her Miranda rights when she eventually confessed and it wasn't recorded. But that is not unusual for law enforcement because the cops know that she was lying and she was making contradictory statements. Once she confessed to the crime that was not recorded, they then brought her to police headquarters and read her Miranda. And I think the important legal point that has to be here, my most concern, is when she says, "What is Miranda?" or "Who is Miranda?" the cops should have stopped at that point. Best practices would say, you now need to reinitiate to make sure that she's still willing to talk to you, because part of Miranda is you can stop answering questions at any time. Despite that, however, I have seen tapes of her giving interviews with respect to this case to local media when the homicide occurred. I've listened to her statements. She speaks perfect English. She was using sophisticated words. She doesn't even have an accent. So I don't think that idea that she didn't know because of the language barrier is going to hold true at all. What will hold true, the one concern, is whether the cops should have reinitiated. But all that means, once she said that what's Miranda, all that means is from that point forward, the stuff may be thrown out. I think the police and the prosecutors get through all of this.
Okay, so Anahita, let me have you pick up on something that he just brought up, and I'm wondering if the prosecution could get the case thrown out simply because the police didn't stop the interrogation once she allegedly asked, "What is Miranda?"
Well, that's a basis for the defense to argue that the tapes should not be admissible. And again, only from the point that she supposedly questioned what her Miranda rights were. And Bob also touched upon the two statements. There are two statements that the state is trying to make admissible in this case. And the first one took place when the defendant was allegedly at the crime scene. And one of the investigators came up and started talking to her. And that's where she apparently said, "I'm happy my fiancé is dead. I wanted him dead. I felt trapped." Now, the state is going to argue that the investigator didn't have a duty to Mirandize her then because she wasn't in custody, that wasn't an interrogation, and the defense obviously is going to argue, yes, she was a suspect, she was in custody, she wasn't arguably free to leave, and so Miranda should have been read, and so that one arguably can be tossed as well.
Bob, what's the strongest piece of evidence against her?
Well, her statement clearly is the strongest piece of evidence. Look, we all know as trial lawyers, as a homicide prosecutor myself, the juries love to convict from the words of the mouth of the defendant themselves. And while I agree, you have to also understand the rule of reason here. Practically speaking, when the cop knows that there's inconsistencies with the story, he does not have to read Miranda. Once she says she did it, then it's an implicit custody situation. And I think that's exactly what the cop did. He's asking questions. He sees inconsistencies. People lie for all sorts of reasons. happens. It doesn't necessarily mean she committed the murder. But once she said that she wanted him to die, the cop stopped the interrogation, brought her to police headquarters, read the Miranda. But I agree with my co-guest here. If that statement gets thrown out, the prosecution's case is hobbled.
All right. Anahita, we should mention to our viewers that the alleged motive in this case was life insurance money. She stood to get about $250,000 from his life insurance policy as his fiancée. She was on it. And then, as you mentioned, she claimed she felt trapped by the relationship. All right, Anahita, thank you so much. And Bob Bianchi, great to see you as well.
Thank you,
Heather.
Real soon.